Hey, I'm Riggers, thanks for dropping in. Today I'm going to be talking about the very first Need for Speed, and I don't think there's any better way to get straight into it than by booting the game up and let's have a quick look at how it plays. Right, so this is the main menu screen. As you can see, we have 5 different options. This one up here is for changing either your car, with 8 different cars to choose from. If you hover over this guy, he's the rival character you have in the game. Same bumper buttons, changes his car, so you can change your opponent's vehicle as well, which is pretty unique. This is the level select here. Choose from 3 different areas, within each of those locations has 3 different races. I believe it's 3, I don't think it's 4. You should drive on. Then that's just your bog standard sort of settings. You've got your skill level. We've got audio levels, whether you want the full motion video on or not. Assisted brake settings. So we're going to play on. I'm going to go on the city track, and I'm going to drive this white car, and we're going to make X-Man our in-game rival. We're not doing a time trial, but if you switch it around to that, it's really weird. Okay, that's a bit of a problem I have with this game. The menu, it's weird. It doesn't have text. It's just images, and then why would cycling through your opponent's rival car all of a sudden turn into a time trial? It doesn't really make a great deal of sense. So I'm just going to click on the ignition button on a time trial, which I didn't mean to do. There we go, change the angle. As you can see, graphically, it's pretty early 3D, quite rudimentary, rough looking stuff to look back on now, I'd say. And it's playing in I describe it as fixed camera angle setting, like it's got a fixed camera perspective. Because while I'm able to move left to right, I'm not able to actually determine the camera angle. So it's more like Outrun or just any of those older racing games, like the 2D ones, 16-bit and whatever. The camera and the track is moving and rotating around my car, as opposed to me being able to maneuver around it in a more modern racing game. So that could be seen as a limitation, but I find it an interesting way to streamline the racing experience, because this being one of the early 3D races, there's a lot going on. But I find this game is a good stepping stone between 3D, the 2D, and into the 3D, because it has some of the hallmarks and tropes of a 2D racer, but it's blending that together and combining it with 3D technology, this early 3D engine and the capabilities, and it's just getting to grips with it all. So all this they've pulled off, I think, is quite impressive. There we go, so we've finished. It says checkpoint there, that's what happens when you come to the end of the first part of a course. Okay, so we'll just do a race on the coastal level, and then, okay, is that okay? Yeah, okay. Let's see what I'll do on this. So yeah, it's a far cry from where the franchise ended up now, in terms of graphics and scope, because you're just racing against one other opponent. As part of the game's story, there's one guy called X-Man, who appears every so often in these FMV video clips to wind you up. That was crap driving. I've played so many different racing games, and when I go back to one, that either plays very differently from the general driving physics and everything that I'm used to, or just one I've not played in a while, especially with a more goofy controller like this. It takes a while to adjust, like in terms of how slow the car goes and hopefully if you quit it'll still show the happen video. It will, there you go. Have an insult.
What did you bargain for? Too real for you?
If I were you, I'd keep this little episode quiet.
I don't think I've seen that one before. So. Yeah. As you see, I did some of them on novice when I last played it, and then I moved up to intermediate, so I built myself up getting used to the game with the easiest difficulty, and then redid every single one on the harder difficulty. That sometimes is how I get used to games. Like, you know, how they play, how they feel. Used to the handling, because it's not just in racing, well, mainly in racing games, not strictly in racing games. Yeah, there isn't really a great deal to go beyond that. It's a very simple fare, really. 3 different courses that have multiple races you have to do back to back, or if you've done that one, it'll go straight into the next one, and you have to do it then. You can't quit out, but you have to do them all consecutively. You know, your opponent's car, your own car, the settings is just, you know, settings. There's not much more to it than that. And I assume it doesn't have multiplayer. Oh, I suppose I'll show off the box properly. There we go. This is what the box looks like. Show the English bit at the top there. Look at read of that. I would show you the manual, but it's only in French and German. So I don't know how much use that's going to be. Any native French, German readers, speakers, anyone who's understands language, I suppose. Oh, Google Translate's a thing, I suppose. We have the English words in brackets there. I guess that's something. Other than that, more to show off for this actually. Right back there. And for some of you that might be your first time seeing 3D on motion, but yeah. Now I'll move on to what I think. So that was a brief preview of the gameplay and the general gist of the very first Need for Speed, known as Road and Track Presents The Need for Speed, published by, well, Electronic Arts and developed by them as well, and available on the 3DO, which is a more unusual console that I only acquired a few months ago and only have 5 games for, but I quite like it. I am rather into sort of bizarre, niche and weird consoles, so it appeals to my collecting nature, and also I'd like to find out the history of gaming's little failures or footnotes along the way that didn't quite take off, and just the quirky, bizarre stuff and otherwise largely forgotten. But the game itself, what do I think of it? Well, I've given you a few of my thoughts as I was just playing it then. There's no music in the races, which is a bit miserable. There's music in the menu, sort of like, you know, funky, generic 90s beat, which is alright. Menu design is a bit weird. When I first booted the game up, as you'll have seen, it's just blocks of loads of images. Now I was able to go through what each of them did one by one, but that's because I've played the game before, and so I know what they all are. But when you boot it up for the first time, if you just met with a menu of a guy wearing sunglasses, well, you can open it up in the manual. This is a picture of the manual. No point in just winging it. There we go. So you've got a guy wearing sunglasses, a wing mirror thing which shows 2 cars in it, a picture of keys, a picture of steering wheel, and just a picture of a location. Okay, in the manual it says what it all does, but if you're emulating it or don't have a manual or have one in French or German like me, then you're not really going to know what to do. And just, well, you know, just booting up the game the first time, like, what? That's, you know, going to be a bit of confusion, especially as a more modern gamer who expects to boot up a game and just, you know, text is on a screen, menus, you know, you expect it to tell you what each button does. So that's a bit of a weird one. I don't mind it, but weird design choice. But, you know, experimentation, early 3D, 90s, the laws and rules hadn't necessarily been written for common game design tropes at that point. So, slightly bizarre menus, not enough music. I like the antagonist, sort of rival character, who sort of give you little, you know, insults and jabs and, you know, mocks you. And he does commend you if you actually beat him all. well, it makes for an interesting dynamic. Of course, that FMV sort of, again, back to the 90s culture and experimentation of that and implementation of that into games, which the 3DO was quite renowned for. There's a lot of shovelware tier games that use full motion video. That's the full title of FMV is. But this is, again, I think, just in a nice understated way. Now, as I'm aware, later releases, basically every release isn't the 3DO version, removes that guy with the sunglasses, X-Man as he's called, from the game. And they also do things like, I think, add more opponents, so you're racing against like 4 or 5 other people, not just him. So there are slightly expanded versions of the game, but for the actual original 1994 release on this obscure console, this is the actual original Need for Speed, the original version of the original Need for Speed, and where it all started. From here we got classics like Carbon, Most Wanted 2005, Underground 1 and 2. What are some of the actual good ones? I do struggle with the Need for Speed games, but it's not one of my favourite franchises by any means. There's way more crap games than good ones, I find. That's why I don't consider it one of my favourite racing franchises at all. I like the 3DS/Wii version of The Run. I've never actually played the normal version. What else? Most Wanted 2010 was alright, as was Most Wanted 2012, that was alright. Payback was crap. Unbound was crap. Never tried Ghosts. Couldn't be bothered with Rivals, can't even pause the damn game. What's the other one? 2015 self-titled just Need for Speed. Didn't bother with that one, even though I own it. Got it for a couple of quid, but never really touched it. Oh, Hot Pursuit 2 on the GameCube, that's a really good one. I love that one. Mainly the 2000s, maybe early 2010s ones, I'd say, were the best ones, but it's interesting to see how the franchise began. For that historical value, even without the interest in racing games, because Need for Speed, it's crossed over into films, hasn't it? It's one of those names, one of those gaming sort of pillars. It's one of those brand names that even non-gamers know. Perhaps not as much nowadays, like in the 2020s, but I'd say as the last couple of decades have gone by, the name and the brand of Need for Speed has been well known amongst general people, certainly in the lower regions of recognition. I'd say it's hardly in the stratosphere like things like Mario as a recognisable mascot and a gaming brand, but Need for Speed is known among the lay folk, as we shall say. My overall thoughts on the game, I'd say it's nice. I like early 3D, more simplistic, shorter experiences. The whole game only lasts a few hours, with it being just 3 different locations with a few races in each of them. But it's got that high replayability value because it's a much shorter game. You're more likely to pick it up and just play it all over again in an afternoon or an evening or something when you've got time off at the weekend. It's got that high replayability but low content. So I say that's a plus. Overall, it lacks that bit of polish, being a 1994 3D game. I think the cars were a bit slow. I do and don't like the whole fixed camera sort of outrun style. It's interesting, but I do prefer just how games normally work, with you manoeuvring around the corners and everything yourself, because this game, it's really just all about stopping and starting, like just driving and avoiding the traffic, and then occasionally braking when you need to. You don't do turning at all. It's not about that at all, this one. So it does take that element away from it. But for a more streamlined, slightly simplistic 3D racing experience, I think it's quite fun. And it's showing the humble beginnings of Need for Speed, early 3D racing, showing off what the 3DO can do, and it's an interesting footnote in history. I'd say I'd probably give it like a 7 out of 10 overall. And recommend you check it out if you're intrigued to try out the first one for yourself, as was I. I was heavily intrigued to see where the franchise began. And it's an interesting experience, regardless of whether you enjoy it or not. Like I say, for historical value. So I'd say, yeah, check it out. Or at the very least, watch some videos of it if you don't feel like playing it yourself. Because it's interesting to see those earlier games and how they run. But I hope this video's been interesting. I've had a fun time chatting with you today about this. So until the next video, you guys have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care for now.